Today we will be taking a look at the essay Introduction Imagined Ancestries, which is an introduction that Ruth Vanita has written to her book Same Sex Love and the English Literary Imagination. This particular video will cover the first topic that is there, concept of Sapphic and Marian love in the essay. Overall, throughout the essay, these are the various topics that will be covered. Concept of Sapphic and Marian, background and the theoretical framework used for looking at these two concepts in literature, alternative literary ancestors are the opposition to heterosexual family structure, critical discourse on gender segregation and how it affects, heterosexual marriage centered view of Western history and literature and how it has to be challenged now by the uh, latest critiques, the Marian myth and imagination and how it liberates the literature as well as the reader, gender segregation in gay studies that is prevalent even today, and it's a self reflexive look at it. She also critically looks at Sedgwick's model. And finally, we're going to take a look at the defending against negative labeling of uh, homosexual love in literature as well as criticism. So, first, let's take a look at the concept of Sapphic and Marian that Ruth Vanita brings up in this essay. Basically, Sapphic is a term that comes from the ancient Greek poet Sappho. Sappho was a very, very well known Greek lyrical poet and is sometimes even considered to be the top among the top 10 lyrical poets of that particular century. And she lived on the island of Lesbos, which is why these two terms have come to be associated with the same sex love among women. Okay, because a lot has been debated about her own sexuality, though there is nothing concrete available. Her uh, imagination of love, desire, and sexuality has very, very often been also connected to lesbianism, and that is why the term sapphic has been derived from that particular name to represent the idea of women loving women. And of course, the sexuality between two women is called as lesbianism, which is derived from Lesbos. Okay. Now, even today, she's considered a great influence on many poets. And that's the basic background to where the term sapphic comes from. It's derived from this particular Greek poet. She builds the background in the essay by first stating that her own research and the book emerged from her research on Virginia Woolf as a sapphic writer. She actually looks at Virginia Woolf as somebody who writes about her own love for women. They may not be sexual, but definitely there is more connection she builds with other women, and the dialogues that she builds with her contemporary women, and the connection she builds to the ancestral writers who were women. So, in her examination of this particular aspect of Virginia Woolf, she ended up writing this entire book itself and looking at the English literary imagination and how it dealt with the same sex love. Now, she talks about how the literary ancestries have always been associated with male ancestry. But she believes that the Romantic age actually brought about a change where women started really building and looking at their ancestries also belonging to women. So that is why when she talks about English literary imagination, she's actually going to look at the entire concept of literature reflecting same sex love in the mainstream from the Romantic age onwards, because that is when she feels that the change came about. Because prior to that, the Reformation as well as the Renaissance period did not actually give credit to the female writers or speak about female sexuality or female love for each other in their works. Okay, they were suppressed. So, Romantic age, with the predominant novelist, female novelist, and others coming up, also led to more expression of other kinds of sexuality. So she says at that point in the Romantic age, rather than Sapphic being something that is silenced or invisible or exotic, actually was integrated into the mainstream English literary imagination. And she says, though the fact is that towards 1880 onwards, in the Victorian age, Freud and Lacan actually spoke about literature only from the male centered point of view, talking about the phallocentric universe of and the heterosexist biases in their outlook towards where literature originates from. She says pre Freudian romantic thinkers actually conceptualized differently, and they also associated literature with women also. Okay, and she especially gives the example of Walter Pater's reading of Leonardo da Vinci's Marianne's paintings, which actually looks at homosexual love. Okay, it's though it is male, it actually looks at the homosexual love in it. So she talks about what she is going to look as in terms of initial exploration in these literary texts beginning from the Romantic age. The first thing that she talks about is that she is going to look at the female non biological ancestors as creator. Okay, the concept of women associating themselves with other female writers in this literary imagination, not because of any kind of physical connections, or not writing from uterus, or not writing from their bodies, okay, which is what many of the feminists have been constantly emphasizing, the idea of writing from your bodies to be truly oriented towards female writing, or to be true to female writing. But that is not a concept that Ruth Vanita actually subscribes to. Okay, she talks about women creating ancestry with other women, which is non-biological also, so that men can also find ancestry with women or female writers. Okay, so she looks at an erotic aesthetics that celebrates joy, which is not geared towards production and reproduction. She's going to actually examine if there are any literary texts which looks at the aesthetics of eroticism without it constantly being associated with the idea of reproduction, which is what every heterosexual uh, structures and ideologies try to promote. She's also going to look at the love between female literary and mythological ancestors, even looking at the mythical characters or mythical female writers, or maybe mythical female figures who have existed or have occurred in the stories across different ages, how female literary traditions have even fallen back on that. For example, Sappho, the concept of Sappho herself being such a great writer, but later on not being recognized even as a poet, even though all the other writers from those ages and poets from those ages were celebrated by men through times. Okay, so she's going to look at these also in the text, is what she propositions. And she says that English literature, since Romanticism, clearly the dominant ideals that were reflected in it has been changed, or there has been a major change, because it started showing human relations and creativity from the models of love between female creators rather than male creators, which has always been the trend. Okay, now let's take a closer look at the concepts of Marianne and Sapphic. Now, she propositions two types of same sex love that occurs in text. The first one that she defines is a Marian love. She says Marian basically eroticizes the mother daughter relationship and gives rise to triangles in which the primary energy is between two women. What she is trying to say, that instead of making the triangles of love which has always existed, the concept of one man and two women fighting over that man, she says these relationships are going to be examined from a different perspective, where actually the two women are engaged in a more let's say more aware relationship with each other, and these triangles are the men are least important in the entire triangle. It's the females who are more important, and what they undergo when they are caught in this particular kind of triangle, which is based on desire, especially sexual desire, and how do they interact with each other. does that also give rise to a kind of homoeroticism also? So that's what Marian love is going to be. So she's going to relook at mother-daughter relationships as shown in literary texts, as well as look at this entire triangle of, wife, a husband, and the other woman, or a lover, husband, and the other, or man and the other woman, and how the dynamics that exist between the women are more important, or are the primary energy that she is going to examine in this. Then she comes to the concept of sapphic. A sapphic is something that develops passionate dialogue between women as a paradigm for lyrical intensity and sublimity. So basically, she's saying that this is not something that is sexually based. Okay, sapphic love is more of a love which goes beyond sexuality, and it just exists as love between two women. And it could be literary also, something that is shared by one woman with another woman, which actually leads to creation of art and literature. Okay, so something that creates that kind of intensity, which gives birth to poetry or art form, or let's say a dance form, or maybe even literature like novel and other things. So that kind of love is what she examines in terms of sapphic love. Now both the ideas, she says, though they are slightly different, because the first one carries an element of eroticism in it, the second one is more platonic. She says, in spite of that, both of these ideas actually subscribe to the idea of community of learning, teaching, writing, and studying as activities that are occurring only among women. Men do not actually figure in this kind of a community. It's a community of women. Okay. And she says, but this is not the only way to look at lesbian relationship or homosexual relationship. It's not mutually exclusive or exhaustive. She's saying this is only a small proposition she's making, or an addition she's making to the already existing queer theory. And she says, by looking at the literature that is produced through these two concepts, will actually help to also relook at the notions of gender as it has been interpreted, especially about canonical literature till date. So this is what she proposes by using these two new words that she has examined, and she has proposed to use in her book. Okay, now, so this is what we have under the first topic, concepts of Sapphic and Marian. In the second one, we will look at what background does she build to these two concepts. How is she going to use a theoretical framework for examining literature? So please refer to the second video for more information on that.